The ink felt like crimson on my skin as I watched him sign the divorce papers, a smug grin plastered across his face like he'd just conned his way out of prison. He held the pen aloft, twirling it with a theatrical flourish, the light glinting off the metal as if it were a trophy he'd won. He even dared to wink in my direction, a silent gotcha that sent a fresh wave of nausea churning in my stomach. They all thought I was finished, that I'd crumble under the weight of their deceit. If you have a sister, a mother, or a daughter you would defend with your life, subscribe now. The courtroom felt like a poorly lit stage, every eye a spotlight burning into my back. My name is Rachel, and up until that moment my life had been meticulously crafted, each brick laid with care and love. I had met David during my junior year of college. He was charming, ambitious, and swept me off my feet with promises of a future filled with laughter and shared dreams. We married young, fueled by the naive belief that our love could conquer anything. I supported him through law school, working tirelessly at a job I loathed, sacrificing my own aspirations to pave the way for his. I believed in him, in us, with every fiber of my being. David always said he loved my unwavering support, my blind faith in his potential. He swore he'd pay me back tenfold once he made it big. And he did make it big, landing a coveted position at a prestigious law firm, quickly climbing the ranks, his name whispered with admiration in the city's elite circles. But somewhere along the way, the man I loved vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his success. The late nights at the office became more frequent, the loving touches less so, until we were living separate lives under the same roof. He started criticizing everything, from the way I dressed to the meals I prepared, each barb carefully designed to chip away at my self-worth. He wanted me gone. He wanted out. He found someone else. The act had been going on for months, maybe even years, but I had been too blind, too trusting to see the cracks forming in our foundation. I dismissed the whispers from friends, the concerned glances from family, clinging to the illusion of the man I thought I knew. He gaslit me, convincing me that I was imagining things, that my insecurities were to blame for the growing distance between us. He was a master manipulator, weaving a web of lies so intricate that I became trapped in its sticky threads. Then came the day he finally asked for a divorce. He presented the papers with a practiced air of indifference, as if he were requesting a cup of coffee instead of shattering my world into a million pieces. He claimed we had simply grown apart, that our paths were diverging, that it was best for both of us. But I saw the glint of triumph in his eyes, the barely concealed smirk that betrayed his true feelings. He thought he was winning. The divorce was swift, brutal, and meticulously orchestrated to leave me with next to nothing. He claimed I had no claim to his assets, that my contributions to his success were merely those of a supportive spouse, not a business partner. He presented documents, forged and manipulated, that painted me as financially irresponsible, a spendthrift who had squandered his hard-earned money. His lawyer, a shark with a practiced smile and ice-cold eyes, argued his case with ruthless efficiency, dismantling my defense piece by piece. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of legal jargon, my voice lost in the cacophony of their carefully constructed narrative. The judge, seemingly swayed by David's powerful connections and the overwhelming evidence against me, ruled in his favor. I was stripped bare, left with nothing but the clothes on my back and the gnawing emptiness of betrayal. The apartment we shared, the furniture we had carefully chosen together, the savings account we had built for our future, all gone. He even fought me for custody of our beloved dog, Max, a golden retriever we had rescued from a local shelter. Max had been my loyal companion through thick and thin, a source of unwavering love and comfort. Losing him felt like losing a piece of myself. I fought back, of course, hearing my own lawyer, a kind, earnest woman who believed in my case. But we were outmatched, outmaneuvered at every turn. David's influence permeated every corner of the legal system, his connections stretching far and wide. It felt like I was fighting a ghost, a powerful, invisible force that was determined to crush me. Sleepless nights became my new normal, the silence of my empty apartment amplifying the turmoil in my mind. I replayed every moment of our relationship, searching for clues, for warning signs that I had missed. Where had I gone wrong? How could I have been so blind? The weight of injustice pressed down on me, suffocating me with its relentless grip. I tried to talk to David, to reason with him, to appeal to the man I once knew. But he was cold, distant, his eyes devoid of any empathy or remorse. He had moved on, replaced me with a younger, more ambitious woman who fit seamlessly into his new life. I saw them together at a charity gala, their arms intertwined, their faces radiating with happiness. It was like a knife twisting in my heart. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand an explanation. But I remained silent, my anger simmering beneath the surface, slowly transforming into a burning desire for retribution. I started documenting everything, every lie, every manipulation, every injustice. I knew I couldn't fight him in the courtroom, not with his money and his power, but I could fight him in the court of public opinion. I began collecting evidence, meticulously gathering information, piecing together the puzzle of his deceit. I reached out to old friends, former colleagues, anyone who might have witnessed his true nature. Many were hesitant, afraid of crossing him, but some were willing to speak, their voices adding to the growing chorus of condemnation. I discovered a pattern of behavior, a history of broken promises, of manipulated deals, of people he had used and discarded along the way. He had built his empire on a foundation of lies, and I was determined to expose it. The act of planning, of strategizing, gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to get out of bed each morning. It was a slow, painstaking process, but with each piece of evidence I uncovered, with each ally I recruited, my resolve grew stronger. They thought they had broken me, that I would disappear into the shadows, defeated and forgot. But they underestimated my resilience, my unwavering belief in justice. They had made a grave error in judgment. They had awakened a sleeping giant. I would not rest until they paid for what they had done. The day they betrayed me was the day revenge was born. The silence in my apartment was a suffocating blanket, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against my sanity. I lost my job shortly after the divorce. David made sure of it. A quiet word to my boss, a veiled threat disguised as concern, and I was out, deemed unstable and unreliable due to my personal issues. I watched my savings dwindle, each transaction a painful reminder of my helplessness. The electricity bill went unpaid. The fridge stood mockingly empty. I started skipping meals, telling myself I wasn't hungry, the lie a bitter pill to swallow. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, a fluorescent orange rectangle taped to my door, a symbol of my utter defeat. I stared at it, numb, unable to process the finality of its message. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. My parents, bless their hearts, were struggling to make ends meet themselves, their small retirement fund decimated by medical bills. I couldn't burden them with my problems, couldn't bear to see the worry etched on their faces. My friends, once so supportive, had slowly drifted away, uncomfortable with my constant negativity, unable to relate to my struggles. I became a pariah, a reminder of what could happen when life took a wrong turn. I considered just giving up, letting the darkness consume me, letting them win. The thoughts, dark and insidious, slithered into my mind, whispering promises of peace, of escape. I found myself standing on the edge of the bridge, the wind whipping through my hair, the city lights shimmering like fallen stars below. The water looked cold, unforgiving. It would be so easy, a voice whispered, just one step and all the pain would be gone. But then I saw Max. A memory flashed through my mind. Max, a tiny ball of golden fur, licking my tears as I cried over a broken heart years ago. Max, nudging my hand with his wet nose, begging for a belly rub. Max, my constant companion, my unwavering source of love and loyalty. He was gone now, taken from me by David, another casualty of his ruthless ambition. The thought of him, alone and confused, missing me, sparked a flicker of defiance within me. I couldn't give up. Not yet. Not when there was still a chance, however slim, to fight back, to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I stepped back from the edge, my legs trembling, my body racked with sobs. The darkness still lingered, but a tiny spark of resolve had been ignited. I wouldn't let them win. I would not become another victim of their cruelty. I would use their arrogance, their complacency against them. I would become their worst nightmare. I walked back to my empty apartment, the eviction notice still mocking me from the door. But this time I didn't feel despair. I felt something else, something cold, something calculating, something determined. I started going through my boxes, pulling out the documents I had painstakingly collected, the evidence of David's deceit. I spread them out on the floor, piecing together the puzzle, searching for a weakness and opening. I spent hours poring over financial statements, emails, text messages, meticulously analyzing every detail, every inconsistency. I started to see a pattern, a web of lies and hidden transactions. I discovered that David had been siphoning money from the firm, funneling it into offshore accounts, disguising it as legitimate business expenses. He had been cheating his partners, his clients, everyone who trusted him. This was it. This was his weakness. This was the weapon I needed. My vision blurred. The glass in my hand shattered, sending shards of glass and crimson mixing together on the floor. I stared at the mess, the sharp edges glinting under the dim light, a reflection of the jagged edges of my own life. I felt the familiar sting of self-pity rising within me, threatening to engulf me once again. But I pushed it back, forcing myself to focus on the task at hand. I carefully gathered the pieces of glass, wrapping them in a towel, disposing of them in the trash. I cleaned up the crimson, scrubbing the floor until it was spotless, erasing any trace of my momentary lapse. I would not allow myself to be consumed by despair. I would transform my pain into power, my anger into action. They thought they had silenced me, stripped me of my voice, but they were wrong. I would find a way to make them hear me, to make them understand the magnitude of their betrayal. I would expose their lies, their deceit, their corruption. I would bring their carefully constructed world crashing down around them. I sat back down on the floor, surrounded by my documents, my weapon of choice. The darkness still lingered, but it no longer felt oppressive. It felt like a cloak, a shield, protecting me from the outside world, allowing me to focus on my plan. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. The game had just begun. They were about to learn that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and I was just getting started. I started small, focusing on gathering irrefutable evidence of David's financial wrongdoings. I knew I couldn't just walk into the authorities with accusations. I needed proof, a rock-solid case that would withstand his legal defenses. I remembered a friend from college, Sarah, who had become a forensic accountant. We hadn't spoken in years, but I tracked her down, explaining my situation in vague terms, careful not to reveal too much. I told her I suspected some financial irregularities in a business deal and needed her expertise to analyze some documents. She agreed to help, her curiosity piqued. I scanned the financial statements David had used against me in the divorce, along with the documents I had secretly copied from his office before I was effectively fired. I handed them over to Sarah, praying she wouldn't ask too many questions. Days turned into weeks as Sarah delved into the labyrinthine world of David's finances. She called me late one night, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Rachel," she said, "this is bigger than I thought. He's been systematically siphoning money for years. It's incredibly complex, but I've found the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, everything." I felt a surge of triumph, a validation of my instincts. This was it. This was the key to unlocking his downfall. Sarah provided me with a detailed report, outlining the extent of David's fraudulent activities, complete with supporting documentation. It was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, more than enough to get him disbarred and potentially face criminal charges. But I knew simply handing this over to the authorities wouldn't be enough. David was powerful, well-connected. He would find a way to bury the evidence, to discredit me, to wriggle his way out of it. I needed to ensure the information reached the right people, people who couldn't be bought or intimidated. I decided to leak the information to the press, to expose David's crimes to the world. I created an anonymous email address and crafted a carefully worded message, outlining the allegations and attaching Sarah's report. I sent it to several prominent journalists known for their investigative reporting and their willingness to take on powerful figures. I knew it was a gamble, but I had nothing to lose. The next few days were agonizing. I obsessively checked the news, searching for any sign that my message had been received. The silence was deafening. Doubt started to creep in, whispering insidious suggestions that I had failed, that David would get away with it all. Then one morning I woke up to a headline that stopped me dead in my tracks. Prominent lawyer accused of massive fraud. The article detailed the allegations against David, citing anonymous sources and providing excerpts from Sarah's report. It was happening. My plan was working. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a mixture of elation and fear. I knew this was just the beginning. David would not go down without a fight. I needed to be prepared for his retaliation. I knew he would try to discredit me, to paint me as a bitter, scorned woman seeking revenge. I needed to protect myself, to control the narrative. I decided to record everything, every interaction with David, every conversation with his associates. I bought a small, discreet voice recorder and kept it with me at all times. I knew it was a long shot, but I hoped to catch him saying something incriminating, something that would further solidify his guilt. I started documenting everything, every interaction with David, every conversation with his associates. I knew he would try to discredit me, to paint me as a bitter, scorned woman seeking revenge. I needed to protect myself, to control the narrative. I started wearing a small, discreet camera disguised as a button, whenever I thought I might encounter him or his cronies. I practiced my responses, rehearsing what I would say if confronted, careful to maintain a calm, neutral demeanor. I wanted to appear vulnerable, naive, unsuspecting, anything but the vengeful mastermind I had become. I knew he was watching me, trying to figure out my next move. He had private investigators following me, monitoring my phone calls, scrutinizing my every action. I had to be careful, meticulous, always one step ahead of him. The pressure was immense, the stress almost unbearable. I barely slept, haunted by nightmares of David's retribution. But I couldn't stop. I had come too far. I owed it to myself, to Max, to everyone David had wronged. I would not rest until he paid for his crimes. The days turned into weeks, the investigation into David's finances gaining momentum. More and more victims came forward, sharing their stories of deceit and manipulation. The firm was in chaos, partners turning against each other, clients fleeing in droves. David's carefully constructed world was crumbling before his eyes. He tried to fight back, of course, using his considerable resources to discredit the allegations, to silence his accusers. But the truth was out, and it was spreading like wildfire. He was losing control. I watched it all unfold from the shadows, a silent observer, a puppet master pulling the strings. I knew the final act was approaching. The day of reckoning was near. I just needed to be patient, to wait for the opportune moment to strike the final blow. He thought he was untouchable. That was his fatal flaw. His arrogance blinded him to the meticulous trap I was setting. I discovered his biggest secret quite by accident. I was sifting through his old emails, searching for any further evidence of his financial trickery, when I stumbled upon a series of encrypted messages. It took weeks, using Sarah's tech-savvy boyfriend, but we finally cracked the code. What I found made my stomach churn. It wasn't just about money. It was about power, control, and a disturbing pattern of behavior that went far beyond mere financial crime. He had been using his position to manipulate and exploit vulnerable women, promising them opportunities, offering them help, then taking advantage of them in unspeakable ways. There were emails, photos, and even videos documenting his acts. It was sickening, repulsive, but it was also the final piece of the puzzle, the ultimate weapon. This wasn't just about exposing his financial crimes anymore. This was about bringing him down for everything he had done, for the pain and suffering he had inflicted on so many innocent people. I knew I couldn't release this information publicly without potentially re-traumatizing the victims. I had to be strategic, careful, ensuring their safety and anonymity while still exposing David's depravity. I contacted a lawyer specializing in cases of abuse, someone with a reputation for fighting for the rights of victims. I shared the evidence with her, explaining my concerns, my goals. She was horrified, but also determined to help. Together, we devised a plan to present the evidence to the authorities in a way that would protect the victims while ensuring David faced the full consequences of his actions. I decided to lure David into a false sense of security to make him believe he was still in control. I started sending him subtle signals, hinting that I was willing to negotiate, to drop the allegations in exchange for a settlement. He took the bait immediately, eager to silence me, to make the whole thing disappear. He contacted me through an intermediary, proposing a meeting, a chance to discuss a resolution. I agreed, knowing this was my opportunity to spring the trap. I chose the location carefully, a secluded restaurant on the outskirts of town, a place with limited security and plenty of blind spots. I knew he would come prepared, with lawyers, with bodyguards, but I had my own safeguards in place. I informed the authorities of the meeting, providing them with the date, time, and location. I also arranged for a group of activists, survivors of abuse, to stage a peaceful protest outside the restaurant, ensuring David's arrival would be met with a chorus of condemnation. I arrived at the restaurant early, scouting the location, making sure everything was in place. The tension was thick, the air crackling with anticipation. I could feel David's presence, his malevolent energy, even before he walked through the door. When he finally arrived, surrounded by his entourage, he looked confident, almost smug. He thought he had me cornered, that he could buy his way out of this mess. He was wrong, so very wrong. As he approached my table, a smile plastered on his face, I activated the small camera hidden in my purse, recording every word, every gesture. "Rachel," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "it's good to see you. I'm glad we could finally sit down and talk." "David," I replied, my voice calm and steady, "I doubt you're glad to see me, but here we are." We exchanged pleasantries, the conversation stilted and awkward, both of us knowing the charade wouldn't last long. He launched into his prepared speech, offering me a generous settlement, promising to make amends for his mistakes. I listened patiently, letting him dig himself deeper and deeper into the hole. Then, when he finished, I smiled. David, I said, I'm not interested in your money. I'm interested in justice. I reached into my purse and pulled out a USB drive, placing it on the table between us. This, I said, contains all the evidence of your crimes, including the evidence of your other activities. His face paled, his eyes widening in panic. He knew he had been caught. What are you talking about? He stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Don't play dumb, David, I said, my voice hardening. It's over, you're finished. Just then, the doors of the restaurant burst open, and the authorities swarmed in, surrounding David and his entourage. The activists outside began chanting, their voices growing louder and louder, drowning out David's protests. He was taken into custody, his empire crumbling around him. As he was led away in handcuffs, he turned to me, his eyes filled with rage and hatred. You haven't won, Rachel, he snarled. This isn't over. Oh, David, I said, smiling sweetly. It's over now. As the authorities escorted him out of the restaurant, a single tear rolled down my cheek. It was finally over, or so I thought. That very night, after giving my statement and finally returning to the eerie silence of my apartment, I received a single text message from an unknown number. Check your security system. A chill ran down my spine. I rushed to my laptop, pulling up the feed from my security cameras. What I saw made my heart stop. A shadowy figure was inside my apartment. And they were not alone. The shadowy figure moved with a chilling confidence, their movements precise and deliberate. On the security feed, I could see it was two people, a man I vaguely recognized as one of David's fixers, and a woman whose face was hidden by a baseball cap. They were systematically disabling my security cameras, one by one, plunging my apartment into darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs, fear mixing with a cold, simmering rage. They wanted to silence me, to unalive me before I could testify, before David's empire crumbled completely. But they underestimated me. I had anticipated this, planned for it. I had a safe room built into my closet, a small, reinforced space with its own independent security system and a direct line to the police. I slipped inside, locking the door behind me, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. I whispered my address, my name, telling them I was in a safe room, that my apartment was being invaded. The dispatcher assured me help was on the way. I pulled up the feed from the safe room's hidden camera, watching as the two figures methodically searched my apartment, tearing apart my belongings, looking for me. They were growing increasingly agitated, their frustration palpable. They knew I was hiding, that I was onto them. Then the woman found it, the closet door. She tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. She yelled something to the man, and he produced a crowbar, jamming it into the doorframe, trying to pry it open. I gripped the small pistol I had stashed in the safe room, my knuckles white. I never thought I would use it, but I was prepared to defend myself. The door splintered, the wood cracking under the force of the crowbar. The woman squeezed through the opening, her face contorted with fury. She raised the crowbar above her head, ready to strike. But before she could swing, the police burst into the apartment, guns drawn, yelling at them to freeze. The man and woman were quickly subdued, handcuffed, and taken into custody. The aftermath was swift and brutal. With the failed attempt on my life and the additional evidence retrieved from the intruders, the case against David exploded. The story was everywhere: television, newspapers, the internet. His reputation was in tatters, his career in ruins. He was disbarred, stripped of his wealth, and facing decades in prison. The women he had harmed finally found their voices, sharing their stories, seeking justice for the pain he had inflicted. His wife left him, taking their children, severing all ties. His friends abandoned him, unwilling to be associated with his disgrace. He was utterly alone, his carefully constructed world reduced to ashes. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. He had tried to destroy me, to silence me, to take everything I had. But I had fought back, exposing his crimes, bringing him to justice. During one of his preliminary hearings, I saw him for the last time. He looked gaunt, defeated, his eyes hollow and lifeless. He caught my gaze for a brief moment, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He simply stared at me, a mixture of hatred and despair on his face. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, he knew he had lost. As he was led away, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't a triumphant smile or a joyful smile. It was a quiet, knowing smile, the smile of someone who had finally found peace. The healing process was long and arduous. The damage David had inflicted ran deep, scarring me in ways that would never fully disappear. But I was alive, I was free, and I was determined to rebuild my life to find happiness again. I sold my apartment, moving to a new city, a place where no one knew my name, where I could start fresh. I started a foundation to help victims of abuse, providing them with the resources and support they needed to heal and rebuild their lives. I found solace in helping others, in using my experience to make a difference in the world. It wasn't easy, but I persevered, slowly but surely finding my way back to the light. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a primal instinct, a desperate act of self-preservation. It's a way to reclaim your power, to stand up for yourself, to say enough is enough. It's not about hatred or malice, it's about justice. It's about holding people accountable for their actions. It's about protecting yourself and others from harm. And sometimes it's the only way to truly heal. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.